let's say, a human being in relationship to a treatment, right? Look at their whole body at once. Just see them as the whole thing. And in your mindset, you can even imagine that there's like a geometry that unifies and is this underlying, like underpinning that connects everything inside of them and everything around them.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological. You've probably heard your patients say this. You might have said it yourself when things seem to take a turn for the better, but you don't want to comment on it because you might jinx it. In the past, I've dismissed this as a kind of reverse wishful thinking, a sort of overinflation of our impact on the world, that by recognizing that there has been a turn for the better, we set in motion the processes that could take that change away. That we are so powerful that with a word, we can undo the improvements that we made. Now, I'm not so sure. For sure, there are all kinds of ways we have of overinflating ourselves that have us gazing at the stars, and so we trip over the vines and the roots of this earthly life. And I suspect we all have experienced moments of exuberant overconfidence. And, well, you already know how that can go, so there's that. But increasingly, I suspect that the world does indeed respond to what we say about it, because what we say about it in turn shapes how we perceive the world. Perception, it isn't neutral. It's a filtering process that involves the story we tell ourselves about the world, our expectations, aversions, desires, hopes, and hatreds. We all have a stake in the story that we tell, and we've got preferences for how we'd like to see the world unfold, but life is rarely a simple arithmetic of 2 + 2 gets you 4. I had a patient some years ago, very staunch in her religious beliefs. She said to me, I really need more patience, but I know better than to pray for patience because God doesn't grant patience. God will send me the conditions and the troubles that allow me to develop my patience, and I just don't have the time for that right now. Attending to the circumstances that give rise to what we want, that's the opposite of clicking a button on the internet to instantly get what you want. Perhaps this confusion is the source of so much anxiety and despair in our modern moment. Our words do have impact, especially those we whisper to ourselves, and especially when we whisper what we don't want rather than what we'd like to see come to fruition. Creating the conditions that allow patience to arise does not mean you'll get extra time and resources. You might get an extra dose of trouble. Creating the conditions for peace and understanding, well, that's probably going to arise through some troublesome conflict. Seems to me, most goodness that has unfolded in my life, it's come through taking on the troubles that I face. As my Buddhist friends like to point out, that lovely white lotus floating on the surface of the pond, it has its roots in the mud. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out the new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Geological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs. They ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lau, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com. And where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Practicing acupuncture has made me curious about sensing and perception. How we somehow come to grips with understanding what might be going on for our patients and befriending uncertainty as part of the path. It's great when we know for sure what to do, and those moments can arise, along with plenty of other moments where we have to make decisions and chart a course of action into the fog. In this conversation with Beth Hazzard, we discuss how sensing influences perception and how it is in the clinic that we know, and perhaps even more importantly, how we know that we know, along with the process of discovery that accompanies all clinical encounters. Let's get into this. Beth Hazzard, welcome to Geological.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so delighted you're here. Our mutual friend, Bob Quinn, introduced us.
Yes.
And he had this idea that he gave me of, Michael Max, why don't you do a series of like East Asian bodywork conversations?
Awesome.
And I thought, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. It's a huge area, isn't it, to explore?
Well, I think so. Often not so much talked about for us needle using folk. We're kind of like, who needs hands, man? I got needles.
Right.
There's a tremendous amount of touch and body work that we talk about. I don't know how many of us use it.
Right.
But every time I talk to one of my bodywork friends, I just come away. I mean, the world looks and feels different to me. There's like ways you guys have of using your sensing apparatus that's like extraordinary.
Yes, that's true. It does. I think that that has actually created a lot of the developments in particular with shiatsu has gone in some very interesting directions, theoretically and practically speaking, in the realm of energetics and sensing based on that. Because I think about how much time a body worker, spends just focused in on another person's energy. It's like the whole session, right? And then when you've got that background of the meridian system, you are just constantly in this feedback loop with the chi
Hmm.
and the information that it can convey through touch.
I guess you can somewhat, chi is such a impossible word to translate.
Maybe.
No, it's definitely hard to translate. I mean, I think it's impossible to translate directly because it could mean so many things. Are you?
I'm working on it though. I'm telling you.
All right. I want to hear about it in just a second.
Okay.
I just heard you use the word information.
Yes.
And I thought, that's right. Chi is a carrier of information. It's like some kind of a wavelength. Wavelength isn't quite the right word. That's more a metaphor. But chi contains information.
Yeah.
So tell me about your definition of chi.
Well, my understanding of chi has expanded recently because I've been studying unified physics. And what I'm starting to come to is this idea that the reason why we haven't understood what chi is from the scientific lens, right? I think can be challenging to say chi is this. However, when we start looking at this fundamental field from which matter emerges, and this is new physics that we're just starting to understand, we see that there is a level of the universe that is part of us, that unifies everything, informs everything, that does a pretty good job of explaining the chi dynamic in human beings. And this is this field of energy that is communicating with all other scales of the universe, as well as the fundamentals for matter to emerge from.
All right. That's one of those really big, like quantum level statements.
You're right. It is.
And there's a part of my mind that can kind of grasp it, and I can kind of draw a picture of, oh yeah, macrocosm, microcosm.
Hmm.
You can see the energy between all the molecules of a leaf, a tree, leaves on trees, that kind of thing. At least in my mind, I can.
Yeah.
But at least for me, it's like I have a mental construct of that.
Hmm.
I don't have an embodied sense of that.
Right. Because it's a level that we can't observe physically at this point. We see evidence of it, but that's true for chi as well, right? We don't have this petri dish full of chi or something like that we can analyze in laboratory, but we have all of these different manifestations that we can start to explore through all of the different diagnostics and theoretical background of Chinese medicine, right? So it's smaller than molecules. I mean, what I'm talking about is what's called the Planck field.
The what field?
Planck.
Oh, the Planck field, like Max Planck.
Yes, yes. And so this idea, it comes from this unified physics model where you're looking at this fundamental level, which would be the Planck scale, which is if you thought of yourself in size wise in relationship to the size of the universe, which you can only kind of sort of wrap your mind around.
I can't even begin to wrap my mind around the thing I call me and the size of the universe. It's like tilt, circuits, fry. I have no imaginable way to do that.
Yeah. So, okay, fine. It's a huge difference. That's a huge size differential, right? But then you think of a cell, if you were to just using that exact proportion and go a universe smaller, you've got what's called the Planck.
So are you saying a universe of a scale that your conceptual apparatus can grasp?
Well, no, there's numbers, there's mathematics behind a lot of this that they're starting to look at. So it's not just oh, let's just kind of come up with something. It's the work's being done now to make sense out of all this. And this is through this Resonance Science Foundation, some of the work of a physicist named Nassim Haramein. And so this has just been really fascinating piece for me because it starts to lend itself to kind of a next level of understanding of what we can tap with our work. Because the more I'm understanding these physics, the more I can see it, the cosmology of Chinese medicine reflected in them. And I feel like when we get into Chinese medicine, we are, in a sense, trying to understand the universe, right?
Hmm.
And trying to understand who and what we are. And I think that's what gets a lot of practitioners into this work is not just like, I want a cool way to work on people's health, but like, I want this greater understanding. So as we start to, like you said, these body workers, and especially people working in energy medicine and East Asian medicine, I think that the more you start tapping into this chi, you're realizing you're tapping into a field of energy that likely is unifying at all scales.
I can grasp that.
Yeah.
And again, there's information in there.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's a lot of how the type of shiatsu that I practice and how it's evolved over time through the different masters that developed it. They started having that, they're in that feedback loop, honestly, with the field and gaining more and more information about the system with which they were working to develop more and more both technique and theory to inform the technique, if that makes sense.
So they're not just working with, shall we say, the meat suit of the patient or
No.
the blood of the patient or even the chi of the patient. There's a field that the patient arises out of. We arise out of it as well.
Hmm.
At a certain point, is it the field working on the field?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a question as to, does anything ever really touch anything else? Just when you start getting into like the particles of things and how they actually, the electromagnetic fields, I don't think I can explain that very well, but
Well, no, I mean, there's that idea. If you're always, let's say, you want to go kiss somebody and you cross halfway across the room and you cross halfway across the room, you cross halfway across the room. At the atomic level, you never get there,
right,
but you can get close enough to get a kiss.
right.
So, like in practicality, you can get close enough.
You're sensing that person. It feels like you're touching them at least, right? You have that.
Well, you're sensing them, and I would say you're connected and interacting.
Yes. Yeah. So it gets really interesting to just be, I mean, I think about how much time I've been practicing shiatsu since I was 19
Oh my goodness.
and I'm 50.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's been a long time.
19 years old?
Hmm.
What happened? How'd you do that?
How did I get into it that young, or
Yeah.
how did I stay in it so long? Those are both good questions.
Well, those are both good questions.
Yeah. So starting out, I guess I was in high school. There were a few different things that happened that started to key me into meditation. You know what? Actually, I had TMJ and I ended up getting a prescription for going for biofeedback. And this woman who had me all hooked up to this whole computer situation to help me learn how to relax my jaw gave me this big talk on the mind body connection. And this was in like the mid 80s. It was very eye opening. That was not something that was like, I mean, I'm on the West Coast. Yeah, that it wasn't that far out there, but it was new for me.
Well, it's a cool thing for a 19-year-old.
Oh, no, this was when I was in high school. This was just sort of the beginning of me starting to get interested in
Yeah.
all this. And then I decided I took a meditation class and just started reading more and more about alternative medicine. And so anyway, it just led me to reading books about, I ended up reading books about chakras and acupuncture and acupressure, and thought I wanted to get into energy medicine or alternative medicine, and was pretty interested in the meridian system and the acupoints and what they could do. And eventually I went to massage school and knew I wanted to study an East Asian modality, and I
Mhm.
went to East West College in Portland, and then the modality that they taught was Zen Shiatsu.
Great intro.
And I was really hooked, and they had a pretty comprehensive program. I think for a massage school where I was getting like my basic education, I got a lot of shiatsu in that program, which I don't know if that kind of thing is even very available anymore, but I was lucky.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, and it just on a technical level, shiatsu is very this was at this point I was practicing like on a futon, crawling around using like relaxed body weight. It is very focused on like your internal alignment. And I am not a very naturally coordinated human being, and it was very difficult for me. And I think I was not a natural. I was a natural at some of the perceptive pieces to it, which got me
Hmm.
interested. I was very interested in the theory, but it took a long time to develop my actual technique, honestly. People, I've taught for a long time, and people are like, oh, well, you were probably just always good at this. And I
Yeah,
really
yeah. No, not at all.
I know teachers that were and that were just kind of ballerinas on day one, but I was kind of a mess.
So what kept you in the game?
Well, it really was just, I was so fascinated by the energy of it. I could read all day about the theory, which was basically Chinese medicine theory. And I practiced for about 10 years, just kind of worked with that basic level. I was doing both like Swedish massage and deep tissue and shiatsu, which I probably wasn't that good at. And then I got to kind of a point where I was really ready to refine my practice because I felt like a lot of my work was like, I'm just kind of like working on sore muscles. And I knew
Hmm.
that was not why I got into it. I was fascinated by the energy and all that went into the theory behind the shiatsu. And so I ended up finding my next teacher, and that was Pauline Sasaki. And she was a direct protege of Shizuto Masunaga, who was the developer of who created Zen Shiatsu. So she had kind of evolved his work and created what she called quantum shiatsu, which is part of how I've gotten into all of the unified physics, which has kind of been a stepping off point for me in understanding the energetics of chi and the human energy system.
Yeah. So you're exactly the kind of person that I just love to talk to
Well, great.
because you've got this passion, you've got this curiosity about something, but you're kind of clumsy with it, right?
Right.
I totally get this. There's a curiosity I've had for Chinese medicine, but I have not felt that skilled for long periods of time. I mean, I feel like I'm catching my stride at this point.
Hmm.
But I think there is something, like you said, there's the ballerinas, there's people, they just kind of naturally get it.
Hmm.
They just get it for whatever reason. And then there's those of us, we have to really work at it.
Right.
And there's something in that working at it that I don't know if it makes us better practitioners or not, but it kind of seasons us in a way. It's like it like grows us in a direction
Hmm.
that we otherwise could not have grown in
Yes.
without that sort of effort on our part to keep going at it.
Yeah. And then ultimately, like turning around and learning to teach it. And really, I felt like I had a lot to offer on that level because I didn't get it naturally. And so I knew what my process, I had to break it down into these little parts in order to like just mechanically do the work. Right.
Hmm.
And theoretically, a lot of it made a lot of sense to me, and I was kind of quick in that regard. But putting it all together in technique, yeah, it's taken a lot of work, and I've stayed really interested and inspired to continue to be motivated to do so.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've heard from people that I've talked to who do shiatsu,
Hmm.
there's a way that they've developed a capacity for sensing. And I know as an acupuncturist, I would like to be able to do that better.
Hmm.
And the reason that I would like to do it better is I'm pretty dang sure that if I knew how to listen correctly, the body will let me know, Yes, I like that needle. No, I don't like that one.
Right.
So I'd like to know more about developing that sensing ability to take that information from the chi, know what to do with it. So I know it's a big question.
Well, it is. And there's kind of like part of it is it's going to happen naturally just by constantly touching people. But then there's that refining of technique. And for instance, with the Quantum Shiatsu that I learned with Pauline Sasaki, she included a lot of that in technique. So things that she included in technique were mindset. So as you're touching the body in informed ways, you are observing and focused not only on like the actual location in the body, but in a whole sense you're focused on the whole body at once, and then zeroed in on this local area you might be working, at the same time lining up a mindset around your information feedback you have with the actual meridian itself and what it's kind of sharing with you. So that's a whole thing to develop, of course. And part of it's based on like a theoretical understanding of the meridian. Like you're like, okay, I'm on this meridian. I know these things. These are the functions I'm working with. This is what it does. And that's part of a distinct aspect of Zen and quantum shiatsu. And we are kind of calling holofractal shiatsu, but it's this information that's conveyed through the field by touching and accessing the meridian, right? So, but one of the techniques, so you have mindset, meaning you're focused on it, you are meditating in a sense on that person's meridian, on their chi. And then you're also doing things like opening up your peripheral vision as a technique. And that's engaging the field itself. Because if you're going to look, you're staring directly, just as that sort of observer idea, you're staring directly at a local area. You're stimulating it actually with your field of vision. You start to open your field of vision and you start getting it a broader range of frequencies based on that local area that you're working. And you're in kind of a feedback loop with that. So it's like at first learning shiatsu and you're just learning how to touch the person and crawl around properly. Or I'm on a table now and teach on a table, but however you're doing it, you're using that alignment, you're getting yourself oriented properly in your physical body in order to access it. But that starts to lend itself through that proper body mechanics, and that can be applied easily to acupuncture. Even looking at, because I'm an acupuncturist as well, so you're working with an acupoint and you're going to put the needle in, even just opening the peripheral vision as you do so can start to open their field up to receiving that input, right? And then if your field is opened up and you're engaging their field in that way, you're more sensitive to when you're done, when you've arrived at the appropriate level. So it does kind of break down into an interesting technique that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be an element of technique.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code Qiological for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. And you need to know when you're done. You don't want to overtreat.
Right. So even observing without touching, observing your patient and getting a sense of what would I look for? I would look for wholeness in the field and unification in the field. Because when something is in a pathogenic state, it's starting to like break down into parts. It's not working with the whole. So you start looking, you could observe, you put your needles in, you observe, just open your peripheral vision up and just start seeing how coherent is the field that you're looking at.
So I want to know a little more about looking at this field.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to share with you an experience that I've had. I don't know if this connects, but there's something that I've noticed in my clinic,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the diagnostic process, especially like I'm not sure what I'm doing with this person yet.
Yeah.
Still gathering information. Sometimes I'll notice something, but if I focus on it too much, it like skitters out of my vision.
Yes.
So there's an element I have found with my patients and whatever is going on that I love the phrase open the peripheral vision. If I kind of look at it from the sides of my eyes, I don't look at it directly. It's kind of like a wild animal. The field's like a wild animal. And it'll hang with you, but if you look at it directly, it'll scamper away.
Yeah.
So there's this, it sounds like you've had a similar experience.
Oh, yeah.
That you want to observe, but you don't want to be intrusive.
Right. It's not just about intruding. It's actually like how you're actually stimulating their energy with your field of vision. It's another part of your technique. You've got the touching part, but the visual part actually can become, and you don't have to see colors and crazy stuff like that. Some people do and some people don't, and that's not necessary, but you will start to pick up on something, right? You've like, oh, I'm noticing something here. It's nice to ask yourself, even if it's later, like, what did I notice and how did I notice it? Because then you can start getting more intentional with that, just having that conversation with yourself. Because I'll think I'll be working along and then all of a sudden I'll like know that I'm coming up on something. I know it's there, but I'm not there yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be aware of the whole as I go along, but I'll kind of say, now, how do I know what I'm about to find? I don't know if I could give you the answer now, but it's just a good conversation. Where did I feel that in my field? Did I feel it in my hands? Did I notice something in my head? Is there something in my vision? Just to start to refine that process and just keep an eye on that and see how it evolves. But so, yeah, you can use your vision as just one element of it because it does literally expand your field. And so now you're in a more expansive state of feeling energy even at a faster frequency. Because if chi is not going to be at this dense manifested level, whatever we want to call it, right? It's not happening. We have manifestations of it in the material, and the material comes from it, right? The material, physical body, biological system comes from it. But if we're starting to like become aware of it, we're going to see it in a faster range of frequencies. And so we're actually like opening up the field to include a larger range, I suppose, would be how I think I would explain it and understand it. Does that make sense?
I'm working with it here. I'm working with it. So we are agreed there's something about the peripheral vision.
Yeah.
That is kind of a receiving. It's like using our receptive capacity.
Right.
There's something about focus that it's more of like a giving or stimulating.
And defining. You're actually kind of narrowing something down. What are you doing with your vision, even technically?
Mm-hmm.
You're defining and clarifying if you look really closely at something, right? And I believe that whatever you're looking at is actually engaged with that at a certain level.
Whatever we take our attention to, we're not just engaged with it, it will begin to engage with us.
Yeah. And so it starts to be a way to focus in our technique.
Mm-hmm. So this is why if you have a plant at a certain part of your house and you happen to see it every day, like maybe it's in your bathroom and you look at it while you brush your teeth,
Hmm.
plants that you pay attention to, they tend to really thrive.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I want to stick with this field thing for a moment because
Okay.
I'm such a nuts and bolts kind of guy. And we start talking about fields and it starts getting woogity pretty quick. At the same time, I'm fascinated by it. And so when you talk about like looking at the field or being attentive to the field, what else are you paying attention to? Or if you were teaching somebody new
Right.
to be attentive, let's put it this way. If you're teaching somebody new to be attentive to the field, it could be a body worker, it could be an acupuncturist,
Hmm.
right? It could be a psychotherapist for that matter, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
If you're teaching someone to become attentive to the field, how do we start?
Well, I do think that using that peripheral vision is a great place to start to look at, because what we're doing is saying that you're part of a unified whole. If you're saying you're part of a field, and that field, we often think of the field as something that is around us, but not necessarily in us as well.
Mm,
But ultimately, the field is continuous throughout the entire everything, including our physical bodies. So we want to see this as a sort of an all inclusive field, and then we can kind of decide how broad we want to get with it, I suppose. But you want to look at the person, start by looking at, like, if it's a human being, or you could look at a tree or whatever you want. But let's say a human being in relationship to a treatment, right? Look at their whole body at once. Just see them as the whole thing. And in your mindset, you can even imagine that there's like a geometry that unifies and is this underlying, like, underpinning that connects everything inside of them and everything around them, right? If that's helpful, doesn't have to have the geometry piece to it. It's there, and it's so small that you wouldn't see it. So just seeing them as like one whole being, and then expanding your vision to include the space around them, but remembering that it's continuous with their whole biological system as well, right?
hmm
And then just you can practice even by saying, okay, I'm going to look at the person like that. And now I'm going to look at them with a narrowed vision of like actually starting to define their features and the surface of their body, and like really look at them like part by part. One of the things that's interesting as an exercise, you get to observe the difference not only in what you see, but how do you feel when you do that? What does it feel like to look at them in the whole? Because you're stimulating this in your own field as well by doing so. So now it's two fields interacting with each other. And then if you start to define it, how does it feel different? Not as in a good or bad, but just like now I'm going to look at the color of their hair or the clothes that they're wearing and even the texture of their clothing and things like that, or different defining features. The other thing to try is to have the person who's being observed to close their eyes and describe how it feels different to be observed in those two different ways if they notice a difference.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I like that idea. That sounds like a powerful exercise.
It is, and I will do that with students who are learning. They're okay now, able to get into a meridian, work along at a reasonable clip here down the line. And I have like maybe I'm working on my sensory aspects just in my hands. I'm starting to just feel what's underneath my fingertips beyond just texture of clothing or quality of the tissue. Now let's see what happens if we open up that peripheral vision and we start to look at the person as a whole energetically. And I'll say, "How does that feel?" And usually the receiver will respond faster than the giver. They think I'm asking them because they feel
Oh,
a
wow.
big
They
difference.
notice it right away.
Yeah. Oh, that feels way better. That feels way different. Oh, all of a sudden I felt that all throughout my whole body as opposed to just right there on my leg or something.
So this gets into what I was talking about earlier. I'm just playing around with this. I'm just noticing some of this stuff. This thing about If I focus too much, people shut down. They'll guard, they'll shield.
Yeah.
Whatever might have been there, it's going to skitter away.
Yeah.
It doesn't like too much attention, likes a little attention. Maybe later would like a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But not until you've got some kind of relationship.
Right. It's interesting too when you think about if you look closely at something, what we're doing when we look in that way, a lot of times we're judging. And I don't necessarily mean that to mean we're judging like in a critical way, but we could be judging like spatial relationships. Like, where am I?
We're using our discernment.
You narrow your vision that way. But we also do that to judge. Like if you think about it, just like if I was going to just be real judgmental and just think about critically think about a person or a thing, right? What happens to your eyes? I mean, it's interesting we're talking so much about eyes, but what happens to your eyes when you do that?
Yeah.
And then try to think that way with your vision opened up.
Yeah, I can feel it.
You kind of can't do it.
No, your eyes really narrow, don't they?
They do. And
Yeah.
so the energetics of that is built in. So is there an aspect as the receiver and how their chi wants to respond that's kind of like harshing on me, man? Like maybe I'm going to run away from there because I'm feeling whatever that dynamic is. And I definitely don't mean that that's what the intention is when we're trying to, a lot of times we're just trying to figure something out, right? Or we're trying to know more, understand. And we're going into that phase of understanding, which is using critical thinking, which is perfectly fine. But then when we start becoming a little more intentional with it, it's very interesting what can happen.
Yes. Well, it's a bit intrusive. We're using our critical reasoning skills for good here.
Right.
But it's a little intrusive. It's also a little intrusive.
Right. And it can make a person feel vulnerable. And even outside of their conscious awareness, that can be going, and their eyes could be closed and they're laying there. And yet somehow their field is still responding to your focus.
So I want to share something with you because I think it kind of fits in here. And I just want to get your take on this. I have heard about very skilled osteopaths doing cranial work and people really good with pulses.
Yeah.
They can really tune into the field, especially of the patient. And they'll come up with stuff, oh yeah, 12 years old, you broke your knee. And there's a part of me that thinks that's cool. I'd like to be able to do that. And there's this other part of me that goes, that's none of my damn business.
Right.
Unless it is, right? In some way to help my patient. But I feel like any material like that, something through the veils of time like that, we need to be so respectful of. And so I was in clinic and I was using the peripheral vision. I was actually working on a patient with a teishin needle. I've been exploring teishin lately.
Nice.
Whoa, talk about some field dynamics. Whoa.
Right.
But I had this thing working on my patient and it was like, I wonder if this thing with the elbow is young, it just kind of came into my mind, right? The word young, young, right? Elbow, young. And I was thinking, I wonder if something happened to her.
Yeah.
When she was young with her elbow. And I was like, you know what? It's none of my business. But then she all of a sudden starts telling me the story of something that happened to her at this age that I'd been thinking about. And those moments, for me at any rate, it just feels so vulnerable. I don't dare try to interact with that directly. I'm happy to hear what they want to bring forth in the present. And I'm wondering if you have any guidance around working with that kind of thing. Because again, I've been working with these teishins lately, and on occasion this kind of thing comes up, and I'm a little bit floored by it, and I don't really know how to proceed. If something comes up and it's present, all right, it's present, but I don't think I want to go looking at it directly, but I still want to be welcoming to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you get to decide as the practitioner how you want to work with people and where your kind of boundaries are around that type of thing. But say that I get all sorts of information that's pretty, some of it's mundane and some of it's pretty out there stuff. and I have to decide how do I want to interact with it. It's always a yes for me to accepting that this is real.
Hmm.
I also understand that I have my own stuff my own mental stuff that it's going to move through, and I could misunderstand the information, right? Like just through my own thing. But I just stay open to whatever it could possibly be. But sometimes the question is this something I want to share with a patient? I will work with it with that patient and try to just engage it. If it's coming forward and I'm not looking for it,
Hmm.
to me, that's a communication between the patient and myself. But sometimes you get the sense like, I probably don't know if this patient's open to communication on about this kind of thing, right? And what I actually learned on how to this is a kind of deciding whether or not I want to talk about it with a patient, but there's more to it than that, it sounds like. But you can actually ask their field a yes and no question and say, just imagine yourself saying, so when I was working on you, I noticed this interesting thing came into my mind, right? Like, and just imagine yourself saying to that to the person. And if their field expands and opens up, you have it kind of, you understand that that's a yes. And if it just kind of goes flat, it doesn't necessarily have to like recede and feel like anything but just like nothing's happening is kind of what it feels like to me. Then that's kind of more of a no as a way of communicating, of like, is this something that, because if we communicate sometimes the wrong thing at the wrong time to a patient, it can be undermining of the work that we're doing with them. Do you know what I mean?
This is partly why I feel so cautious.
Right. Like, even if you were to say, like, oh, I just have the sense I want to give them a recommendation on lifestyle, but they're kind of not ready to hear that.
Yes. Yes, I do know.
Yeah. You're like, you should do this, drink all this water. And they're like, I've never seen you again, or something like that. Now, it might not be that dramatic, but you know what I mean? Like, they're like, it's good to have a tool to explore outcomes before you actually say it. And then you're kind of in that more open,
Hmm.
expanded state, just ready to like get the yes or the no and just go with it. But so that's a possibility of how to decide how to move forward with that. And then also exploring in yourself, like, what makes me uncomfortable? Like, what if someone picked up on something like this in myself? That could be one thing to explore as to why and also just like, can I do this? That's another question, isn't it? Like, am I allowed? Is this real? I try to give myself ways to communicate so that I give them an opportunity to like shut it down if they're like, that's weird. Like, if I were,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I've heard that as a response to like, hey, this was kind of fascinating. I was working on your shoulder and I picked up on some information that seemed like from the past or something like that, right? Most of the time, though, the person, it hooks them, there is a relationship to it through the field itself. And there's actually, I think there's physics that explain how our past experiences are feeding into our now. And we don't always have to go back there to change that. We're in the now and we can perceive it from that level. But if it's coming forward, it feels meaningful,
Hmm. Yes.
right? It's like, okay, I got this information and now it seems like maybe I should work with this in some way.
Well, back to, does it want to be worked with?
Yeah, there's another yes, no question.
Does it want to be worked with? And I'm taking this to the very physical, concrete. You mentioned this a moment ago. Do I want to give them some lifestyle advice?
Right?
Well, here's what I've learned through lessons painfully learned over many years of people not listening and me wasting my breath. Never give advice if it's not asked for.
Hmm.
Just don't do it.
Right.
Just don't do it. And so, in similar fashion, would this part like to be worked with?
Yeah. And you're working with it. If it came forward, I would say this, you're working with the patient. It came forward. You can simply observe it and allow it to resolve in whatever way it needs. You just know this is part of the picture of our now. This has come forward into an expression based on my technique right now, and it is being worked with. And sometimes it feels appropriate to talk about it, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's going to, if you're finding resolution to the energetics in the local area you're on with your technique or in the whole field or however you're working, then you're addressing it.
Yeah, I think there's this idea in my mind that for healing to happen, we're supposed to take things that maybe we stuck down into the unconscious and we're supposed to make them conscious. And there's this other part of me that thinks, well, maybe not. I mean, maybe for some things, maybe not for others.
Right.
There's all kinds of ways we resolve our experience.
Yeah, that's true. Because sometimes that stuff that's way deep in there that's not the way it needs to find resolution, that would be traumatizing.
It may not even be verbal.
Right.
It may be so old it's not verbal.
Right.
So that wouldn't help.
Right. Or is it in this lifetime? There's another question.
There's another question.
That's a big one, but we're working with, or is it on our DNA with our Jing, right? Those are things that could come up as well.
I don't even know how to think about that.
Right. Well, it's a fun thing to consider, but I will say this. So here's an interesting piece of how the work that we do is unique, is that Zen Shiatsu evolved to Quantum Shiatsu and then has kind of evolved beyond that. We're working with the idea of holofractal shiatsu. But ultimately, what we're working with is what my teacher Pauline had come up with, is this idea of anti-pathogenic qi, not to be confused with the traditional use of that term, which is usually zheng qi. It's a broader use of the term, and I think you would like this. It's working with the innate intelligence of the system. So when I'm working on a person, I'm actually not engaging with the pathogenic phase. I'm working with the inherent health and intelligence of their chi.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of, I think, speaks to the longevity in my work, because the anti-pathogenic or that innate intelligence in the human being that I'm stimulating and focused on feels really good. And it feels good to me and it feels good to the receiver, right? So, for instance, when something comes up like, okay, some energy that's like in the pathogenic phase, like we could call it like this decoherent field of energy that's expressing as pathology, right? It's there, but I'm going to look right through that, because within that is the health already exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't actually have to do anything with that will resolve itself as I stay focused on that healthy chi, on the intelligence of the system that would be based on like whatever meridian I'm on, right? And what I understand about that. And also like the information that they're sharing about the meridian and I'm perceiving. So it's a really different focus, and it makes it easier in some senses, because what do? You can't resolve another person's trauma for them, for instance, if that's like part of the internal cause of whatever the pathology that they've come to you with is about, right? What are you going to do with that?
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
And if you attempted to, I would say you're overstepping your bounds.
Right.
In some ways, they're going to cause you some grief in the not too distant future.
And even like if it's the idea of like pushing, like we could sit around and kind of push stagnation around. In a sense, with this concept, and we do this, we have points that move chi and so on and so forth, and that's all fine. But like we could stay focused on the movement of chi as opposed to the engagement of stagnation
Hmm.
as an aspect of your mindset. Like if you're going to use that model. Now in shiatsu, we would just work on like the healthiest expression of chi within that meridian, which is infinitely healthy. And we're just bringing that person into like an aware state of connection to that as part of who they are. They're remembering their innate intelligence, the innate health of their energy.
This is why people love acupuncture so much.
Yeah, because you're being reminded of who and what you really are.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to talk about that something might be going on with the person, but I want them to walk away remembering more about the health of themselves than the problem they came in with.
Hmm. So you were talking earlier about mindset,
Mhm.
and this sounds like an expression of that.
Yes.
And I've heard the old school osteopaths talk about like the capital H health, right? The health, that part of us that cannot be made ill. Like even at the moment of death, it's there, it's present, it can't be made ill.
Yeah.
Looking at that, focusing on that, giving that a chance to be attended to, appreciated, expanded. Now, this gets really interesting really quick. Most people come to us with some kind of pathology.
Yes.
And what is it that we're focusing on? The pathology. Are we getting in our own way by focusing on pathology?
I think we can. I mean, it's a dance that you do because you're not going to have the person walk in there who's experiencing something difficult in their life, and you're going to recognize that that's happening and that that's hard and that you're there to help them in whatever way you can. And yet then for me, I'm like, one of the things I do, like just in intake, is start working toward a goal. So the goal has to be in that antipathogenic range, right? And it's not to say I will address what's going on. Like you go right into, say, we're just talking musculoskeletal, you go right into the shoulder that's affected and has all the things happening there. But when I go into the meridian, what am I feeling for? What am I engaging with? I'm engaging with that strong, clear resonance within the meridian that knows itself, that knows how to be well. And I could do that locally, I can do that distally, and I can be having a conversation with that health of the being throughout the entire session. And people will engage with it at different levels of readiness, I suppose. Some people don't want to be talked out of the difficult thing that they're dealing with. And I have no judgment on that. It's just a matter of like, where are you today and what can we do? But even just feeling yourself just through the touch and the energetic work starts to create the change.
Do different meridians feel different to you?
Yes.
What do you notice?
Well, and this is how I start with it, like on a teaching level, is just saying in some ways they express their energetics just through the like natural landscape of the body, right? Like say like stomach meridian in the legs has this sort of hearty, earthy quality just to the tissue itself, right?
Hmm.
And that's kind of like your gateway in, is to just start to pay attention to like that's part of the energy, is the physical is energy too, right? It's just more of a manifested part of it, right? But it's interesting. You start to develop your own way of relating to it through like that's sort of informed through the experiences you have, right? By exploring even the elemental associations. But I mean, it's like, how would I describe them as different?
That's always such a great place to start an inquiry, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's be something here. There is something here, but I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. I'm like doing shiatsu on my own leg right now while I think about this. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, yin and yang meridians can have some different qualities to them in general. Like just fullness versus something that an energy that draws you deeper. And that can be based on location and all of that as well. But yeah, I mean, you start to feel like it's not, because it's not just the physical sensation, it's like what happens in the field, like back to that again. But like,
Yes.
what's it like in your whole body when you're tapping into this energy? What happens? And so I would say I feel it more like that, like the movements and the ways that the energy expresses throughout. Like you think about like kidney energy. I mean, to me, it does kind of go deep. It does start to have this like resonance at the bone level in my own body. And like I can start to like feel that in the other person. So yeah, those are different ways that I might notice it, and it would be different from person to person to some extent as well.
Well, I've just been palpating my own meridians a little bit as we're having this conversation. Since you mentioned that the stomach channel has this hearty sense about its tissues.
Mhm.
And so it's just like, oh, well, what's the lung channel feel like? Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely softer. And then how's a triple burner? It's like, whoa, that's kind of a buzzy, vibraty dude, at least on me here today. And then you mentioned, well, you don't have to just focus on the meridian. You can pay attention to the field. And I realized, wow, I'm really putting my focus. I'm staring right at that thing.
Yeah.
What if I soften and go a little wider
Yes.
with my touch and with my attention? That's a completely different experience.
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. That can be done. You're welcome, and that can be done, like you said, like, in a lot of different contexts with all different kinds of medicine, but in particular with.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great place to start the inquiry.
Yes.
Do it when next time you walk into clinic.
Yeah. Just start looking at the whole person before you even touch them, because that's the beginning of the treatment. We know this just by observing them, but like practice expanding and contracting your field of vision as you're looking at the person and just see how it changes what you notice.
I love it.
Also, how comfortable the patient is with you, too, right?
Yeah, you can watch for that. I know with certain people, especially when I'm seeing them for the first time, where we don't quite have a relationship established, I don't like to look too directly at them.
Right.
I mean, I want to be attentive to them, but I don't want to stare. I don't want to energetically stare.
Space. Yeah.
Right? It's like I'm working you out, so I know where to put a needle. It's like, well, maybe a little softer.
Right.
So a couple other things that come to mind with this.
Hmm.
And the first one is, how do I separate my own imagination or wishful thinking, for that matter, from what might be present?
From your perception, you mean?
Yeah, from my perception.
Well, I say this in a teaching context, and I'll say it to you. The imagination is the gateway into perception, if not an aspect of it. So I do encourage imagination. So, for instance, this is one way to start to get a better sense of the meridians is imagine what they look like.
Mm.
In your mind's eye, if you're working along this trajectory, what are you seeing? And let go of the idea of where this information is coming from. You can set yourself up with the intention is I'm trying to look at this person's energy and I'm not trying to just look at myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be an interaction going on there. So we can't eliminate that altogether. And that's really okay, because part of what you're doing in that kind of a dynamic between receiver and practitioner is the interaction between you and that person is part of what you're doing there. You can't be just neutral, nothing. You're you. So how you perceive is unique to you, and the interaction and the perception you have of that person is based somewhat on the interaction between you and that person. So if you allow that, then that's okay. So that would be one kind of just permission level to give yourself. And then to start imagining, what is it? What if I imagine it, isn't that interesting? Here's an interesting one that can come up is, why can't I imagine it right here? But then I imagine it very clearly here. Is that perception? Is there something, if we're going to say, I mean, this gets more into like, what's happening with the energetic flow of chi in this area that I can't discern it very well? And then for me, I would say then I need to like focus in or expand my focus actually more. It's interesting. I would go into an even more expansive phase
Mhm,
to
mhm.
find that energy and draw it forward if it's really receded. And does that correlate with something going on locally or something like that? Those would be ways of starting to make sense out of what you might notice in your so called imagination. But I honestly think, like, really open it up because it's all real. There's no part of your experience that's not real. It's all part of, we can't like say, oh, well, this isn't reality just because it's happening in my mind. It's just a different way of being in reality is in my mind. Or so yeah, I would say allow the imagination to start to inform it. And the more clear you get in your work, the more you do it, the more you start to notice maybe little differences between stuff you're picking up on and something, I don't know, projecting. I try not to worry about projecting that much, honestly.
Well, I worry some about that. Is this my stuff or their stuff? Or do I have a goal for them and I want them to get to a certain place? Am I sort of pushing on them in a way to get better so I can feel good about me?
That's a good question. And that would be where you would engage it from.
Yeah.
It would be like, probably you want a little too much out of the situation. And we all do, but that's always something to check yourself on.
Mhm.
What do I want out of this? Do I want to feel good about myself because they are getting better or something like that? And sometimes just naming it, then you can move on from it.
Yes, yes, I have found that as well.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm not feeling so great about myself today. It'd be nice if you got better.
But then you realize too, like, I don't know, after 30 years in practice, I like, it's going to sound weird, but I don't care in the way that I once did.
Ooh, what happened? How did you get to a place of not caring? That's really interesting.
Well, what I realize is I'm not as big of a part of this as I think I am. I'm there to be helpful and maybe a larger level of divine timing on people's evolutionary process of wellness that like I'm not trying to control that. I'm just trying to like be part. I'm just doing what I do and I don't feel as attached to the outcomes in that way. I want to see, I mean, if someone's like I feel completely the same, I mean, I'm like, "Oh, that's too bad. Maybe this isn't the right thing for you. Maybe we need to find you a different person or for whatever reason." But usually that's not the case. But, you know, small gains are good, huge gains are great, and I enjoy that. It's exciting to see what we can do with our work, isn't it? Like
It is exciting.
you're like, "This is awesome. You feel great, I feel great." But at the same time, it's just it's okay for it to just be a little thing one day, too. I don't know. I guess that's just over time it's gotten that way. Also, I'm going to throw this in quickly, but
Mm,
self cultivation, huge. Qigong, whatever you do, yoga, it doesn't matter. But take time to cultivate you so that you're more and more clear in your own vehicle
mhm.
and you show up like just ready. That's how so much of that work clears the stuff you have going on that gets you engaged in the process in ways that aren't helpful to you or your perception or your patient, right?
Yep, that makes sense.
So, and it's even if it's just 10 minutes of meditation in the morning, it makes a difference.
Over time, it certainly does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what I just heard you saying a moment ago in your like being with what shows up, there's a kind of neutrality that's within you
Hmm.
to whatever experience arises. Big thing arises, okay, that's cool. Small thing arises, oh, look at that.
Yeah. And I'm really like, I'm in it. If I'm in it for something, it's probably for learning.
Oh, I love that.
I often am thanking my patients for showing me something fascinating about their energy field or who they are that I would have never experienced had they not walked in my door,
Mm,
right? So I get excited just to learn about the process of all of it and human beings and the universe. I mean, all of that is like so much of what I show up for.
wonderful. You know, this is funny. At the beginning of today's conversation, I thought we're going to talk about putting our hands on people and sensing things. And here we are having taken this completely other journey
Yeah.
into not what we do, but how we are.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that. This has been very thought-provoking, and so often happens after one of these podcast conversations. I can go back into my clinic and there's something new to investigate. I get so excited about that.
Yeah. It's fun to have those, just that added perspective of like, ooh, what if I do this through this new?
Yeah. What if I do this with my perception?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say too, I do work in a very physical way as well. Like I can work very deep and very focused in that way. It's just funny, but it is all through that bigger picture of
Mm-hmm.
perception and the energetic field. And honestly, like I will say that the field sounds confusing, and I think that there are physics emerging that will clarify things in a way that make the understanding of it on a very technical level will make what we do in our medicine so much more clear and effective. It will make so much sense to us in our medicine. It's going to be cool to see what happens, because the more I understand it, the more my whole being just lights up and I get how this is happening. Like even that idea of like connecting in through the DNA and understanding that actually that DNA is imprinting information on the field, and it's in like a resonance with your now and can be accessed. Just things like that, that like there's a technical piece to that that will make sense out of so much of what we're already doing. I think that's part of it, because we're already exploring this through all different ways of working with this medicine, like all of the ways that we work with it.
Wow. We could really go down a rabbit hole with DNA and its imprint on the field. That sounds fascinating, but maybe for another day.
Another day.
Another
Yes.
day. In the meantime, if people were interested in learning more about the kinds of stuff we've been talking about, do you have any resources that you could point people towards?
Yes. Well, we have our Shiatsu school that is getting back in action now that we're kind of coming, hopefully, to a better place post COVID. So we have a new cohort, or it's starting soon, but we'll be starting up the second one in 2023. So our website, you can find information about that on our website, which is pdxschoolofshiatsu.com. And then in terms of unified physics, there's an amazing free resource that's Resonance Science Foundation, and they have a free physics program. You can also be a paid member and pay like $5 a month and be involved in live Q&As several times a month and support what they're doing. But it's really an amazing thing to have that so accessible. But it's the work, the main physicist is Nassim Haramein, and then he has an incredible team of people working with him, biophysicists, another guy named William Brown. You can find lots of their talks on YouTube. They have a Facebook page, but I'm a big fan of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And what was that website again?
It's Resonance, RESONANCE, science.org. And yeah, it's so cool to have that as a resource, that physics program, because it'll get you kind of the overall picture. And I think it's really inspiring for anybody, but I think it's has some real relevance in the field of Chinese medicine.
Wonderful. Well, Beth, thank you so much for this really enjoyable and helpful discussion today on perception and sensing and fields and working with our patients. Yeah, it's been great.
You're welcome. Thank you for talking to me. And it was just really thought-provoking questions. And I love this stuff.
It's what keeps us in the game, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hearing Beth's thoughts on peripheral vision, it struck a chord with me. It's something I've noticed in my clinical work, that there's something out at the edges, something the patient doesn't name. Sometimes because they're not sure how to name it, and other times because it's something they'd like to get rid of and so reluctant to name it. Often enough, it is a sense, a kind of presence, and it does not want to be front and center, but neither does it want to be ignored. I suspect we all have parts that want to be seen but not stared at. They want to be integrated but not live in the spotlight. I've had patients share with me ancient hurts or confusions in soft ways that bring them present, very tender material, often enough, nonverbal, and attending with the peripheral vision seems respectful, like dealing with untamed animals. You want to move slowly, with attentiveness, but without too much direct focus. We all have untamed parts looking for integration, and the peripheral vision is a way of connecting without being invasive. And finally, there is something about being touched with attentive hands that are engaged, but not too inquisitive, connected, and with room to breathe. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.